I think I should begin with, in relating to music and worship, I think I should begin with how I started my journey. So ever since I was born, so I turned 2, and my mom was super keen on making me learn the piano. So she bought a keyboard when I was 2 years old, before I could even start speaking. And apparently, I don't remember any of this, but she took me to the piano teacher when I turned 4. So the moment I turned 4, she was too excited, so she took me for a class, and then we got sent back saying, my fingers are too short to begin. So she sent me back saying, you can come back a few years later when you grow up a bit more. So my mom couldn't wait, so we waited another 3 years, and then I turned, when I was 7, when I went into second grade, my mom finally took me, and then I could start. So we would go for classes twice in a week. So unlike most of you who may have just picked up a music, a piece of instrument, and then just learned it by yourself, I have not been like that. I was forced to learn the piano, and then I had to practice. I had to go for classes twice in a week, and sometimes on rickshaw we would carry our huge keyboard and go on jeep also, all these modes of public transportation. And I remember even having to buy batteries because the lights would always be out. And so the effort that was put for me to learn music was there, and I'm so grateful now today that instead of me having to wake up one day and say suddenly I want to pick up an instrument and learn how to play, I already knew before I could even feel that. And then suddenly one of the first teacher that I had, she was also the pianist in our church where I grew up. So about 4 or 5 of our friends together, all around the same age, we all would take classes together. So suddenly our teacher had to leave in the middle. Her husband was the pastor, and she was the musician in the church, and then she suddenly had to leave. So I think we were about in class 4 or 5, where we suddenly had no teacher. We were still learning our basics, and we hardly knew how to play, with both hands. So it was basically single notes, and it sounded really bad because it was just the beginning. But like most churches back at home, we had hymnal singing. So morning service, evening service, we had 3 songs each. So what happened now, when I look back, I realized how important my church family was. Church encouraged us because they suddenly did not, there was so much emptiness without music while singing in the church. So the church encouraged us little children who were class 4, 5-year-olds to start playing in the church. And they would not be sick of singing the same 3 hymns, morning service, evening service, month after month, week after week. And I'm really grateful for our church, first of all, for that. I never realized this before, but when I was looking back at how, I begun, I was looking back, and suddenly I remembered I should be very grateful for that, because the church really motivated us, taught us how to find confidence also, and taught us how, encouraged us to play even though we had only our basics done. So that was how. And then a few years down, maybe when I was in class 8, we joined a new church when our family moved. And then there again, another family, another completely different church that we were in, and I was made to be a part of the worship team again. I was always the youngest wherever I went, because I was still in school, and there were hardly any people who were, aware of, who knew how to play piano. So fortunately for me, I was able to be involved in most of the churches that I was in. So that's how from class 8 till 12 again I completed. I had not missed a single Sunday in my life. Then I moved to Delhi again for my BA and MA. Even then I joined this church called Delhi Bible Fellowship in Central. Then I think after a few months of joining the church, the pastor and the worship leaders, a few of them, they called me and they asked me to join the team. So later on I found out that they had been waiting, observing me, whether I was a regular at church, whether I would be committed to be a part of the team. So all of that, so another 5 years of my working with the worship team. So over all these years, I think I started very early, and then I hardly remember also, but when I look back now, I really thank God for giving me that opportunity to be a part of, a ministry that God had placed me in. And from all of that, there are so many lessons that I've learned, so many things that I think I value now, because even during some of the in between a few of the years, there were some of us in the team. We had so many teams, like we were on rotation every week. So there would be some who had to be disciplined also. There was a phase. Then I know the value of being accountable. We don't just come, play, perform, at church, just learn a song and then just come up to perform on stage and just sing, in front of people. It was not like that, but it was more of, there was a sense of accountability that we had to keep up. We had mentors that, guided us, we being young, first of all. And then, so through all of that, I had also been exposed to a lot of people different kinds of people, different kinds of musicians, different kinds of singers. So in all of this, because of this being a musical Sunday, and then I thought I would share just a bit about what worship really means. Let me just read from Psalm number 40, verse 3. It says, "He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord." So when we begin to think what worship really is, I thought I had been involved in worship, all my life. I never missed a Sunday. I thought it was it just became a very normal thing for me. I would feel awkward sitting in the congregation because I didn't know what to do with my hands when, I would just stand and sing. Because I was so used to playing and being active part in the church. But it hardly occurred to me to think about what worship really means, even if I was up on the stage every Sunday like that. So when we read and think about what really is worship, we worship something when we truly value a person or a thing. So in this context, when we mean worship, we mean worshiping God. It means we only worship, we bow down before God because we are truly satisfied in God. And our way of worship is putting God's supreme worth on display. So when we only value Him and treasure Him truly from the core of our heart, that is what worship really is. So in this verse, when it says, "Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord," I think trusting here means, abandoning ourselves to God, because we have not worshipped God enough if we have not let Him be in control of our lives, and if we have not left everything of ourselves to God. So how then can we say, how do we worship? I think once we understand and establish what worship really means, I think how do we worship? It's written in, if we can all open together to Ephesians chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. Whoever has Ephesians chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. So how do we worship is where here Paul writes about, it says, "Speak to one another with psalms, hymns and spiritual songs. Sing and make music in your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ." And also in Colossians chapter 3, verse 16, it says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom, and as you sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts to God." So here it mentions how we worship, how with psalms, with songs, with hymns, and also always giving thanks to God for everything. I think, so I'll just give a few examples of what I have faced in life, what I have been made to go through, difficult and both good and difficult. And when we really talk about how we give thanks to God, from how do we worship? Yes, we've seen how God says it's about with singing and psalms. But why do we worship in the end? Why do we worship? In Psalm number 103, which is the main one that I wanted to share from. Psalm 103, from verses 1 to 5. It says, "Praise the Lord, O my soul, all my inmost being, praise His holy name. Praise the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits, who forgives all your sins and heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit and crowns you with love and compassion, who satisfies your desires with good things so that your youth is renewed like the eagles." I think why we worship, I think we should also think over why we worship. Why do we worship? Now we know what worship is, we know how to worship, but why do we worship? We worship with thankfulness and with gratitude. We do remind ourselves of the many benefits of God that He has done for us. See, in David says over here in the first verse itself, "Praise the Lord, O my soul, all my inmost being." I think he realizes we are all human. Sometimes we come from a bad week. Maybe we've had a bad day. We've had, a fight or an argument in the family. Something is not right, and we come to church. And maybe we're distracted even when the singing is going on and when we hear sermons, I'm a human, I know I can, even when people are singing with full heart, I cannot enjoy, I cannot be in that moment sometimes. But I think despite all of that, we are called to worship God despite all of our weaknesses, all our problems, all our worries. Because no matter what, in the end, when we count the benefits that God has given us, when we count our blessings, the very breath that we take, the very fact that we have clothes to wear, food to eat, I think that is also enough for us to come to God and to worship Him. When I talk about good times and bad times, it really reminded me once again. I think most of you may not know this story, but let me just tell you from the beginning. So with our son Aiden, I think it's been 3.5 years now. So he's our first son, and when I first conceived him, we were so excited. We were expecting, okay, maybe I thought, I think it'll be a boy, that excitement. I started buying clothes, I started buying things. And then there was a point where in the 5th month of my pregnancy, I went for an ultrasound, and then I found out the doctor, so it took him quite a while. It took him about 40-45 minutes to finish up the ultrasound, and then we asked him, "Doctor, why is it taking so long? Is there a problem?" Then he said, yeah, let me just see, let me confirm. So he called in 2 or 3 other doctors, and we got terrified. My husband wasn't there, he was traveling. So I was with my mom and my aunt. And just imagine, the doctors started calling other experts and, talking about something, and I did not know what was going on. I thought all this while, he must be a healthy baby. And since it was my first, I also didn't know what implications would come from just a simple ultrasound. So at the end he said, your baby has a heart problem and you need to abort your baby before it's too late. So you have about 2 weeks to decide. You go home, decide, because once you have this baby, because we don't know what's going to happen, once you have this baby, you're going to go for treatments, you're going to go for, all sorts of inconveniences. That's the word he used. He said it will be very inconvenient for you after he's born, because you may go for treatments, you may have to, do this procedure, that procedure. So he said abort, that's the only solution. Then he just left. Then my mom, my aunt, and we looked at each other and we were like, how can, the doctor just say it like that? Then we went home, I Googled, which I should not have done, or maybe it's good that I did. I Googled the details about what a hole in the heart was. So basically, he had a hole in the heart, and we wouldn't know until the baby was born. So I found out everything, and one of the things that I also found out was with a hole in the heart, babies are usually with Down syndrome. So then Down syndrome, in the beginning of the pregnancy, we were told if you wanted to test whether your baby had Down syndrome, we both said no, we won't do that. There's no need to find out. Even if the baby is a Down syndrome baby, even if the baby is born with a disability, it's God who gave us, so we will not, we'd rather not know, we will still have the baby. So we had opted not to take the tests for Down syndrome. But then when this ultrasound came unknowingly, unexpectedly, we found out already that something was wrong. So now just imagine our excitement, our anticipation for the baby to come was also filled with lots of uncertainty and lots of disappointment. I think when I look back, I didn't want to question why, God. I didn't want to question what that would happen to me. But even though I didn't say it out with my mouth, in my I did not say it out loud, but in the back of my mind, I thought, Lord, I've been a good girl all these years. I've been in church ever since I can remember. I have done what a good girl should do from the outer, worldly perspective. And I've been so faithful. Why would you allow such a thing to happen to me? I had this doubt in the back of my mind, but I didn't want to say it out because I also believed, and I know that God doesn't allow only good things to happen to us. To those He loves, He brings trials, He brings difficulties, and that is a process for us to be refined, to be molded. While I knew that fact, it was still very hard for me to accept what was going on. So the day before he was born, I was walking, trying to induce labor. And then I just, prayed. I have been praying, I was praying. Lord, I don't know what this baby will look like because I suspected Down syndrome. I don't know what's going to happen as soon as the baby is delivered because the doctor said, you can expect the baby to turn blue because of heart failure. If it's a very bad case, you can expect that the baby's heartbeat would, slowly start, would be very inconsistent, this and that, whatever scientific medical reasons that they could give. So we were also mentally prepared at the same time. I said, Lord, whatever it is, I don't want to complain. I don't want any complaint to be on my lips, but I just want to trust in you that you know why you're doing this. And even though I don't understand what I am going through right now, what is going to happen, I know that you are going to do it for good. Maybe I would not have prayed that much over my baby if I hadn't known that there was going to be an issue. And maybe God knew that I would take it for granted. Maybe. I just don't know. But so the next day he was born, I was scared to see my baby. Honestly, I was very scared to see my baby. I heard his cry. I found out it was a boy, but I just couldn't bring myself to ask the doctor to show me the baby first. And then the doctor's wife was with me. She brought a picture. She said, see, your baby is very healthy. But they did not bring the baby to me. They rushed him straight to the NICU because they wanted to keep him under observation. All pediatricians came, cardiologists came, and it was during the first lockdown, so it was very bad as well. And I could not hold my first baby for 2 days, and I did not even see him. I had to see him through the glass, and I cried because I had a baby. I just had a baby. I couldn't even touch and hold my baby. So I think I had never had a hard time that I felt personally until that day, that moment. And then only after 2 days I got to hold him. And then even after that, there were no flights to even take him for checkups because there was no facilities available in Far. So my husband even went to the point of contacting for air ambulance in case there was any emergency, in case he turned blue. We had to look out for his face, his lips, his fingers, not knowing what was going to happen. So through all of that, I began to think, now when I look back, I realized the song, which I think it's on the list later when worship team picked the right song, which I was going to talk about, Lay Me Down. It says, I lay me down, I am not my own, I belong to you alone. And it says, at the end it says, it will be my joy to say, your will, your way, right? So when it came to that point, I used to enjoy singing this song in worship team. I had a very good team who was really good with their music, their own instruments. I had really good worship leaders, really good singers. We enjoyed, we could hit the right notes, we played the right music, just like the original, that fun that we have, we derive from playing the right music as well. I enjoyed that song so much, but then when it came to this point, I thought of that song. I think the song was playing somewhere, and then suddenly I couldn't sing the bridge, It will be my joy to say your will, your way. Like, how can I say I am joyful? How can I didn't understand what it was, because it was so painful for me. It was such a struggle as a parent, as a mother, to go through such an uncertain moment. Then after that, before we could take him for surgery, we thought he would be under surgery. So I prepared our bags for about a month or two, enough clothes for 2 months in Bangalore. While packing, I thought, I have all these clothes, I have all these diapers, but who knows, I may come back without a baby in my arms again. I was even mentally prepared to that extent that I would lose my baby once the surgery was done, or even before that. Then we went, and surprisingly, they said it was not a case of emergency, you can come back after 2-3 years, and then before he turns 4, before he goes to school, we'll definitely do a surgery. So that was a big relief. That was in the 2.5 month after his birth. So things like that happened, and throughout this time we did not know, we would always be on the lookout for symptoms, for difficulty in breathing, this and that. And I suddenly started singing, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see, He will make a way. That song, which I knew since childhood, which never meant anything to me but just a song with lyrics that I knew, suddenly I found myself meaning every single word about that song when I held my baby in my arms and I sang. Because I just wanted to trust that God will make a way even when doctors said, there is no way, there's nothing that we can do. So, now it just sounds like a story when I look back, and it's just, he's fine, everything seems normal, he's running around. But in that moment when I went through, I realized, just the simple songs that I grew up singing on the stage, leading people in worship, just clapping and singing and enjoying the music at church, really only began to mean everything, to feel everything, only when, such a trial came in my life. So it taught me, now when I look back and say, how do we worship? It says, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything, right? So not when we are not only asked to sing when things are going good, but in everything means it also includes pain and suffering in our lives. And this was when it really taught me what coming to the throne of grace really meant, what surrender really meant. By saying surrender again, after his surgery at 2 and 4 months, 1.5 months later, we had to go back for review. That flight again caught on fire, and we had to stop midway and come back home. So, at that moment, every time we sit in the airplane, I think we think, it's very easy. You relax and you just reach in, a matter of hours. But then that day also really shook me, because the moment you sit on an airplane, it's absolute surrender. No matter, I picked up my bag, I said I saw fire from the window. I told my husband there's fire. When he didn't believe me, it was at night. He said it must be those reflectors. So I said, no, I think it's fire. And then I just put my phone in my bag. I just picked up my bag from the floor and I started standing up to walk out of the plane. And he's like, where are you going? Because I can't go anywhere. The flight was about to take off. So once you sit, it's just like when we talk about surrender, it's just like you sit in an aircraft and you cannot run. If it explodes mid-air, there's nowhere you can go. You won't even know that you died, in a few seconds. So it's just like that. So this journey, this phase in our life, it really taught me personally to experience what real surrender meant, what coming to the throne of grace meant, and all these songs which I sang so easily just started meaning so much more. So my self-righteousness, thinking that, I have been a good girl, what wrong have I done to deserve this? That was totally stripped down. So in my weakness, I now realize God wanted to mold me, to shape me, and to refine me through all of these processes. So I just want to, through all of these experiences, I had wanted to share and remind each one of us, especially our worship team also. There is such a huge responsibility of a worship team to lead people into worship. It is not what we do on stage that very day as well, but it is that personal, the life that we've led in the week. To bring, your responsibility, our responsibility on the stage when we lead a song is to bring people into the presence of God. Maybe on a Sunday, like I said, maybe people have come from a bad week, from a bad day. But maybe it may not be the sermon that speaks to everyone in the same way, but maybe it's just a line from a song. Or maybe it's just, it could be the little things. So that is how much, we have to realize how important it is that we as a worship team also, especially in our music, in our singing, when we come to praise and lead people into worship, I think we have to remind ourselves of the weight of the responsibility that we have. And also for, the rest of us as a congregation, when we come into church, we should, our minds and our hearts, we should tune to glorify God, to completely surrender, to trust, like we had discussed before, about what is worship. What is worship? It's trusting God. Trusting is abandoning ourselves completely to God. So I think through all of this, it is not only about singing, it's not only about music. Yes, God has gifted us with talents, with gifts, which nobody else can, impose on or force upon you. But it is a God-gifted talent that He has given. So I think what we need to remind ourselves, and I want to encourage each one of you also, through all of this, even though we may be singing, we may be serving at church, we may be, doing mere things like cleaning up the church, everything is service towards God. And that is how, I think we should think about how we glorify God in our lives. So through all of these small experiences, I just wanted to take this opportunity to share. And even me, I have also taken this up as a challenge for myself. Ever since I got the message from Punggolo that I've been excusing myself excusing too much, giving too many excuses to I still say my kids are still young. I don't they don't know how to sing, they don't know how to sit quietly. But over the years, when we grew up, my parents never failed, morning and evening family prayers together. That's how we learned a lot of songs. That's how we were introduced to what worship is and how singing really is to enjoy. So I think now, with this opportunity, I'm taking this up to challenge myself also to introduce the singing, this worship in the house, even though, when the kids are still young, to invite, how we revere God and how we glorify God in our lives, in our daily lives. So I thank you for listening, and I just want that all of us be reminded and be refreshed once again to understand what, like I said, what worship really is and how we should worship and why we worship. I think let us all constantly remind ourselves that. Thank you so much. May God bless you.